I'm Connor Rogers from NBC Sports here with another Big Ten film breakdown, but with a guest, Noah Eagle, who has seen plenty of Big Ten players throughout this season, of course, for Big Ten Saturday night on NBC Sports, and a little bit different today. How about 5 under the radar players? All of these guys are draft eligible, are in the draft right now. They have declared or they have even graduated. Noah, let's start with a big time program in Michigan. How about Mike Sainristil, their slot corner? Such an interesting player, converted from wide receiver to cornerback for Michigan, and a defense that not only won a national title and has all of this star talent, it's a converted wide receiver that ends up being one of the household names in their secondary.
Yeah, and really, as Jesse Minner, their defensive coordinator, described to us when we met with them earlier this season, he was the engine to that defense. He was an igniter. That was the word that really was used around that facility, was someone who ignites everybody else, especially from the back line and the way that he played. But he was such a great communicator. And what always stood out, Jesse told us this great story about basically the first day on the job as the defensive coordinator was the day that they decided to move Mikey Sainristil to the defensive side from wide receiver. And he wasn't sure. He's like, all right, I don't know. Wide receiver, how's that going to go in my defense? Is he going to be able to tackle? Because that's the main concern. His ball skills are going to be there. He can be a great ball hawk. But when he needs to go up and make a play, is he going to be capable? So he talked to Jay Harbaugh, Jim's son, who's the special teams coordinator, who had worked with the defense and had really known Mikey very well. And he said, so what's the deal? Is this going to work? Why is this going to be good for our defense? And Jay turned to him and he said, this will be the best thing that ever happened to this defensive unit. This guy is just like that. He's one of those guys that it just feels like he's always going to make an impact no matter where he lines up. And the tackling was the last thing that was a concern. They saw the first practice that he was playing at that defensive backfield that he was a great tackler. He wasn't shying away from contact. He was willing to go up and go low and go high, whatever he needed to do to get the guy down. And he did it consistently. He did it regularly. And that continued, obviously, all the way through this season. But the ball skills are evident. The thing that the entire defense improved on, and Mikey was at the forefront of it this year, was after the interception, instead of just taking the interception, actually trying to take it back. And they had a ton more pick sixes this year than they did last year. A lot of that was because they watched Iowa's defense in the last couple of years and how they would handle themselves after interceptions. If Cooper DeJean had an interception, the blocking from all of the rest of the defense, how they set it up, it was basically like a return. Well, Mikey was as important in that piece as anybody because of his ability to see holes, his ability to let blocking set up and develop. So we saw that through the year, but a really good kid. We had a chance to talk to him. He definitely is super mature, wise beyond his years. He definitely also invited a lot of his teammates to try. He's originally from Haiti. His family's from Haiti. So a lot of Haitian cuisine, which was cool. They were all raving about that. Jim Harbaugh went on his visit to Sainristil's house and literally told us he had to get second and thirds of all the food that his mom made because it was so good. So he still raves about it, and I'm excited to see what he looks like at the next level.
So am I. A gamble that paid off for Michigan, and it paid off for him. I mean, this is a 23-year-old prospect that now has his best football ahead of him. He's going to probably be a day 2 pick in this draft, and the 6 interceptions he brought up, just a game-changing ball hawk where all of those wide receiver traits translated to being a slot cornerback. The tracking of the ball, obviously the ability with the ball in his hands as well, completely altered Michigan's defense. Let's move over to their rival in Ohio State. How about tight end Cade Stover? Listen, when you watch Ohio State every year, you got the Ferraris at wide receiver. We've seen it in the NFL with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, on and on it goes, Marvin Harrison Jr. Mecca Ibuka decides to go back to school, but it's just insane how much talent this school accumulates at that position. But the tight end doesn't get the same glory. We've seen it with Jeremy Ruckert. Now Cade Stover does the dirty work as a blocker, has upside as a pass catcher with his size. What did you see from him in this offense this year? A guy that I would imagine the coaching staff just loved.
Yeah, and they did. They raved about him. Ryan Day couldn't say enough great things about what he brought. But another guy that had to change positions. I mean, he was a linebacker early in his career. This is someone who started in the Rose Bowl at linebacker and was their best defensive player, arguably, in that game. Made a ton of tackles, made a ton of plays. And that was the same season he had already shifted over to tight end and started working as a tight end. It kind of showcases his versatility. And he was that type of guy. He was a yes man. He was a yes teammate. He was a yes player there. Anything they asked of him, he did it at a high level. what stood out when we had them 3 years this year, or 3 times, I should say, this year. And every time it was how dependable he was. And he was banged up through a lot of the season and still played through the pain, still produced at a high level. And it was surprising how complete of a tight end he actually is for somebody who hadn't played the position at this level maybe as long as others. And I'm glad you brought up Ruckert, because when we asked Cade, who are some of the guys you've watched? He said, well, Jeremy Ruckert was as important in my development as anybody, because he was still there at Ohio State. And then he got to see him now develop in the NFL and watch a ton of tape on him. And he felt like watching his practice tape was important. And then watching his game tape, especially, important as well, mostly as a blocker, if nothing else, but then definitely the route running ability and the choice routes and whatever else he could come up with. But the dependability was unbelievable. It was off the charts. Every time it felt like he was targeted, he found a way to make a play. He had some huge catches in that Notre Dame game week 4. He had some huge catches late in the season in some games we had with Ohio State as well, where it just felt like every time again that Kyle McCord would look his way, he would come through in some fashion. So he's a big game performer. We know that. I think that's always important to see how guys respond on the biggest stage. I mean, you look at CJ Stroud in his 2 opportunities as a postseason quarterback, so to speak, in college, the Rose Bowl, the first year college football playoff semifinal, the last year against Georgia, and he was stupendous both times, and that translated to the NFL. I think Cade Stover, you can take a lot from how he handled himself on the biggest stages and the biggest games this year. He didn't bat an eye, which I think is important, especially for a guy who was at a different position. And the last thing I'll say about him is, his work ethic is going to be off the charts. And that goes back to his time on the farm as a kid. And he still loves it. He takes his teammates back to the farm. Ryan Day told us he had to go to recruit him at the farm. That's a legitimate part of his life. Said his little 5'2" Italian grandma was making spaghetti and meatballs for everybody. So that's a big part of his life. But with that, he said a lot of it translated to his work ethic on the football field and practice and in the weight room, because every morning he had to get up, he had to milk the cows, then he had to go over and he had to collect the hay, and he had to do all the chores essentially around the farm from a very young age. He felt like that instilled a work ethic, and all of his coaches have echoed that sentiment. So another guy that I think will be really interesting as he makes the transition to the next level.
Every bit of a gritty player, tons of experience run blocking, and it helps that he caught 10 touchdowns over the last 2 years. All right, another player on this list that got overshadowed by his teammates in terms of his pro potential, Adisa Isaac, the edge rusher for Penn State. Coming into the year, the talk was about Chop Robinson. Obviously, on the offensive side of the ball, Olu Fashanu. This is a Penn State team that just churns out NFL talent like no other. And when you look at Isaac, he tears the Achilles in 2021, so a little bit of a slower comeback in 2022. He explodes this year for Penn State's defensive front in 2023. Not only made himself a lot of money, but made that unit so much stronger in the process.
So I always find this interesting, because the best defenses tend to have 2 elite edge rushers, right? And you can do it with one, and we've seen it obviously with one. But Chop Robinson was elite, and we knew he was elite last season. He just continued that into this season. And every game that we did of Penn State, we did 2 of them. We did the first game and the last game. Chop Robinson jumps off. He jumps off the tape. He jumps off live. Like, you see it. You understand why he's different, why he's special. And it's the same true for Olu as well. And all those guys who have that highly touted feel to them. But, we got a chance to do the Steelers and Bengals, and the Steelers, to me, are a perfect example of a team that has 2 elite edge rushers. And TJ Watt, and all the attention that he garners, allows for Alex Highsmith to be as good as he is. And I thought that was the case with Penn State. And Manny Diaz told us before the year, before that first game against West Virginia, that he felt like Adisa was primed for a big year because of the attention that Chop was going to get. And he basically said to us, he looks at them as if they're both his children, and he's not more proud of one than the other until one makes a big play to get a sack. And then he's more proud of one than the other. But he felt like they were as close to even as they could be. And I felt like it told a lot about Adisa's character for a variety of reasons. One, he's a quiet guy. And what the coaches told us about him was he's the type of leader that's going to lead by example. And when he does speak, because he doesn't speak very often, everyone is silent and all eyes are on him. He commands respect in the locker room. And you could see that really in how he interacted with his teammates. But the second thing, he was unselfish. He wasn't going out there saying, I need to do this, this, or this. He understood that having Chop with him was going to make the totality of the parts better. And I think we saw that from Penn State. They balanced the 2 of those really, really well. Adisa has some absolute gifts on the edge, coming off the edge, and it'll be someone who I think can keep getting better because we've seen that over the course of his college career.
We move over to the back to the offensive side of the ball with a guy in Deshawn Jones, the wide receiver from Maryland. He's been there a while, but he really had his best season for last this year. A short area target. I mean, 6 games of 70-plus yards in 2023. We just hadn't seen that from him in previous years, Noah. And one of them was against Michigan. So this is somebody that had some big-time performances. Maybe not somebody that'll be drafted in the first 3 rounds, but such a reliable player for that Maryland passing attack.
And I think it's probably a good player to take a flyer on.
Yep.
And that comes from the intangibles. That doesn't even come from what he does on the field, which is productive. He does produce at a pretty high level, as we saw this season. And Maryland was an interesting team overall. They felt like they were going to compete with the big boys in the Big Ten East this year. They felt like they were ready with Talia Tungavailoa coming back and all the pieces they brought back. They had a stellar defense this year as well, but they just couldn't quite figure out. However, with that being said, sure, they didn't win some of the games they probably should have won, but they did play their best against the best competition. They played great against Ohio State. They didn't play great against Penn State, but they played fantastic against Michigan towards the end of the season. So when they had to go out and play well, they did. They probably could have or should have won the Ohio State game. There were some clear miss errors there. And when I say intangibles with Jeshaun Jones, the one story from the season that you hear, and it went public, and he talked about it with us because we had them the week after, but that Ohio State game was their first loss of the season. And when they would win on the road, they got to wear sweats on the plane back. That was part of the deal for Mike Loxley and how it works. And they all get on in their sweats and everything. And Jeshaun Jones said, no, we're not wearing sweats. We're wearing our suits all the way on this plane back because we have to win and earn ourselves a chance to wear our sweats back. We have to earn ourselves a chance to be comfortable. It's why they called him Coach Jones. I mean, he was there for a long time, a 6-year guy, a lot of injuries that he had dealt with early in his career and adversity. But he was the guy that he was an extension of their staff. He was an extension of Mike Loxley. He knew him like the back of his hand, and he did it in a way that wasn't intrusive, which I think is the most important, because we all know those people. We all played sports growing up, and in youth sports or middle school, high school, you have the guy on the team who's annoying because he's the extension of the coach. He's annoying because he's too much in your face about it. But Jones wasn't like that. He did it in a way that was very digestible and appreciated, really, by both the coaches and the players. And one example was in the beginning of training camp. Every single year, Mike Loxley gets up and he gives the same spiel that's basically like, hey, just don't get in trouble. Don't be stupid. We've got a lot of goals as a team. Stay together. Just a spiel, before they go to their team activity to start training camp and get everything going. And Jones got in front of the team and did it before Coach Loxley even got in the room. And he said that everyone was silent. Everyone was all eyes on him. So he commanded respect, similar to Adisa in the locker room. So I think that tells a lot about his character. Really hardworking kid, someone who worked on every route in the book. He and Talia were staying after practice. In fact, they got together in the off seasons and they would run routes and they would throw back and forth and just kind of get comfortable with each other more and more and more each year. So someone who's going to really want it. I think you talk to him, you see just how badly he wants it. We asked him how he wanted to be remembered over there in College Park. And he said, as one of the greats, as one of the guys who you think of, the Stephon Diggs of Maryland and some of those others who have had some high quality careers, then moving on to the next level, DJ Moore, et cetera. So he felt like he could get to that. And I think that, from just a want to perspective, he has all the tools. It'll be dependent on, can he get there physically to play at the next level?
I love hearing stuff like that because this is somebody that, like you said, he's had the long road. He's been at the program for a while. He's dealt with injury. Now he has experience. I mean, the inside-outside versatility, over 750 slot snaps, almost 500 out wide over the last 3 seasons. So he's going to be able to do a lot of different things when he gets into a training camp. No invite for the top all-star games right now to those seniors. I wonder if he's one of the first calls as guys either drop out or get injury. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on him. Our last one in Tyrone Tracy, the running back from Purdue. No, this is one of the most interesting skill players in the entire draft to me. When you look at Tracy, he was a wide receiver at Iowa, a former Gatorade Player of the Year at Indiana. At Iowa, got a lot of experience blocking as a wide receiver. He ends up converting to running back at Purdue, something I don't think he was initially opened up to. And man, what a creative runner. That blocking helped him in pass protection as a running back, so you could leave him on the field. 46 missed tackles forced. He had only a little over 100 carries. Now he's got an invite to the Shrine game. This is a big time riser for a player that felt forgotten about after his Iowa career.
Yeah, well, it was funny. It's a funny point by you because all those Iowa wide receivers are probably good blockers
Yeah,
because they've had a lot of practice doing
right.
so. And so if you need a blocking wide out, you know where to go. But Tyrone Tracy, I'm with you, was a fascinating player for us. And he was overshadowed in some ways by Devin Mockabee as well, just because of the story of Mockabee as a guy who was a walk-on. And Ryan Walters' first day on the job, he said, where's Mockabee at? We played against you last year. You're too good. Giving you a scholarship. First day. So that's what everyone was looking at in the Purdue backfield this year. But Tyrone Tracy was the guy that was the home run hitter for them and had the ability to be a game breaker at times. I mean, he had the kick return touchdown rather in their season opener against Fresno State that looked like at the time it was going to keep them in front for good in the second half. They eventually lose that game. And I think that he didn't get quite enough attention because of how poor their offense was at times this year, which I do think is going to improve. You know, that was the first year of the air raid offense there for Purdue. New quarterback who it was his first time as a full-time starter. I do think that they have talent moving forward, but Tracy was someone who probably deserved some more eyeballs on him on a week in and week out basis. And it's because of his ability to hit the hole. He really learned a lot quickly as a running back, patient style, but also explosive. And we saw that with his return ability. But you're right. The pass protection was there. The coaching staff loved him. They loved his versatility as a pass catcher out of the backfield as well, which is natural from a former wide receiver. But I think has a chance to, because of the burst and the natural gifts that he possesses. You talked about it. Someone who was highly touted out of high school. And Iowa thought that he was going to be a legitimate wide receiver for them too. Let's not knock him as a wideout necessarily. It just wasn't the right situation. And he may have found his calling. He's speedy. He's got that home run ability, like I said. And it'll depend, I think, probably on the situation he's in at the next level. He's one of those where if he gets drafted to the right situation and they use him in the right fashion, it feels like he could be a legitimate impact player at that level, especially on special teams. Like that's where I see him excelling potentially off the bat. You know, he can play running back. He can be a third down back for a team for sure. But as a special teamer, and that's how you're going to make the field and get out on the field early, I think that's where he can excel pretty quickly.
It's a great call out by you. If you want to be the third running back on a roster in the NFL, you got to be able to do a lot of different things. And that mostly includes being able to be on the field and passing downs and being able to handle either return duties or kick coverage duties, a lot of special teams work. And like you said, that's something he's been able to do, especially showing off that 98-yard kick return for a touchdown this year as well. If you have thoughts or suggestions, get involved. Tweet at me at Connor J. Rogers, and your favorite player could be up next in the Big Ten film breakdown. No, it was great having a guest for this. Really appreciate you joining, man. Great insights all around.
I'm just glad that I got to see you out quaff me in the hair department, but I appreciate you having me, man. This was fun. Hopefully we'll do it again soon.